Shalom Aleichem, a good night of Shabbos, Pasha Shoftim. Tomorrow's Vovel, it's the Shloshim, Rav Chosid, Rav Goin, Reb Yoel, ben Reb Nachman HaKoyen Khan, Reb Yoel Khan. So in his honor and his memory, I'd like to share a few stories, some of which is in my latest book that came out, Reb Yoel, the Rebbe's Chayzer, and it's available on my website, rabbidalfin.com. So it's 1954, and Reb Yoel marries the daughter of Reb Zalman Butman, Rebbe Elye Gross. I heard this following story from Reb Elye Gross of Crown Heights, who told me he heard it from his father directly, who was instructed by the Rebbe after Reb Yoel married to find an apartment for Reb Yoel and Rebbe Elye Gross in Crown Heights. And the Rebbe told him what type of apartment? An apartment that has 2 windows in a manner in which there's good cross ventilation and good lighting. It's a short little story, but it's an insight into the Rebbe's concern and closeness to the Khans. And I share this story not just because it's something that most of Lubavitch Chabad doesn't know about, but because it shows the relationship. And the relationship is not to make the Khans, holier than thou, and Reb Yoel, who was a chassid and a genius and everything else. That's not the purpose of the story. The purpose is to show that the Rabbeim and our Rebbe had a special interest in this couple, to the point where not only does he want Reb Elye Gross, Nuchi's father, to find them an apartment, but he wants it to have good ventilation, cross ventilation, so that you can open the windows, and because there's 2 windows on either side, there's a good wind in the summer. In those days, air conditions were not rampant, were not found in apartments and in houses as well. It was not yet the days where there was air conditioning all over. And also good lighting, so it's bright for this new young couple. And this reminds me of another story going back to Reb Elye Khan, Reb Yoel's father, and his Zayda Reb Sholem, showing that the relationship of the Rabbeim from the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe Rayatz were also close and looked favorably at this Khan family. And I want to, at the end, I'll summarize what the point I'm getting at. So it's 1929, I believe, and it's Moscow. It's the Harol Synagogue, a beautiful shul which still stands today and is open, and you can go visit. I visited it in 2019. And in that shul, there's a mikveh in the basement. And after Stalin came out with his edicts and he closed most of the shuls and the chadorim, the cheters and the mikvehs and all that, this shul was still open because they wanted to show that they still like Jews and they like Judaism, and therefore they don't mind that older people, senior citizens, daven and learn, but they were against young children because to study and learn, they wanted them to be indoctrinated in Russian culture, which meant the rejection, God forbid, of a God and all that. So the board of the shul decided they're going to close the mikveh because the mikveh was something that's used by young people, by women who are of childbirth age, and that they were against. And the board didn't want to have problems that if they don't close the mikveh as they were told to, the government will close the shul. So they closed the mikveh. So the Baruch Shalom Khan and a few others, but it was led by the Baruch Shalom Khan, he went to them and he said, "You better open the mikveh. If you don't open the mikveh, we're going to react." Of course, they didn't listen. And it was during the Yom Tov, I believe either of Achashel Pesach or Shavuos, I forget now the exact Yom Tov, that all of a sudden the Baruch Shalom and a few others came into shul, and when they were about to take out the Sefer Torah for Kriyas HaTorah, for the reading of the Torah, they disrupted the whole shul, and they made noises, and they didn't allow them to take out the Torah, and they said, "We're not moving from here until you all agree to open that mikveh." And there was chaos in the shul, and they had no choice, and the board opened the mikveh. I was down in the basement there, and I saw where the mikveh was, the area of the mikveh. This story is recorded by Reb Emanuel Michlin, who the Rebbe told to print his memories of living in 50 years in Moscow from 1922 to 1972, and the Rebbe actually gave him, I think, $4,000 to print his sefer. It's called Hagacheles. It's a one-of-a-kind sefer, his memories. He was the son-in-law of the Rav at that time in the shul. So it's a first-hand story. He says he was there when it took place. This is what the type of Zayd the grandfather Reb Yoel had on his paternal side. A Yid who was Meiser Nefesh. And then we talk about his son and Reb Yoel's father, Reb Elye Khan. So Reb Avram Mayor, Reb Avram Drizin, the noted venerable Chabad Chassid, who was, they say, one of the 10 Chassidim that was Kodesh Bris, who made a pact with Frierdiker Rebbe, do or die for Yiddishkeit, and who helped so many Yidden and brought Yidden to Chassidus. And he was himself a Mashpia and a Talmud Chochem in Nigla. And then he came to Crown Heights, and I happened to develop a close relationship with him and spoke to him quite a bit. So on the Ginzei Lubavitch tapes, which I released years ago, and if you haven't listened to them, it's interview recordings of 6 Hasidim being interviewed about their memories of Lubavitch. They all learned in Lubavitch, and the one that's interviewed for about 8 hours is Reb Avram Mayor, Avram Drizin. And he says there, when the interviewer asks him about Reb Yoel Khan, his statement, his answer is, "Reb Yoel Khan, das ist doch Beis Harav. They're part of the Rebbe's household. Elye Khan, Reb Elye Khan, that's like a brother and sister to the Rabbeim." And Reb Avram Drizin was a very smart chassid, an intelligent chassid, and he was a pikach, clever, not a shaitan, not a fool, and a very chassidish yid and a Talmud Chochem. And the way he answers the question is like, what are you comparing other Hasidim to the Khans? They have a special place in the Chabad leadership of the Rabbeim. So when I heard this from Reb Avram, and I put this and then read the story in Michlin's book, and then I heard the story with the Rebbe asking Reb Elye Gross to find Reb Yoel and his wife an apartment, I put them all together, and I share this with you to show, and this is just a tip in the iceberg, that this family stands for humility, subservience to the Eibishter and to the Rabbeim. So it's only natural that Reb Yoel, whose Shloshim is tomorrow, with Tevis Nishmaseh, for the benefit of his soul, we need to look at the family, the history, where he comes from. He comes from a father and a Zayda that the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe stayed at times in their apartment in Moscow. This is written in the Sichos. This is no secret. Why did he trust them? The Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, because they were like blood. They were like family. And Reb Yoel was a continuation of this. B'meila, therefore, what's the lesson for us as we're in Chodesh Elul and we're coming to the Yom Tovim? The lesson is that those people that are his students, and those people that he put them on their feet, meaning in the sense of understanding properly Chassidus and the ways of Chassidus, those are people that people should look to learn with and listen to. Because these people took from them the right hashkafa and the right hadracha. They were trained by him with his pedigree, which has the sanctioning and backing of the last three Rabbeim, the Rashab, the Rayatz, and our Rebbe. And I say this for another important point. Many people in the last 30 years think they knew Reb Yoel. They didn't. They did not. You needed to learn with him and be with him in the 60s, and the 70s, and a little bit in the 80s. But from after Gimel Tammuz, he wasn't the same person. I'm sorry. I've discussed this with other Chassidim, and they agree. I'm not going to go into, it has nothing to do with politics. The real Reb Yoel, okay, is the Reb Yoel of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and maybe early 80s. That's it. So those Talmidim that, and another thing, it's not just everyone automatically was his Talmud. For example, we had 30, 40, 50 chevra at the shir, when he gave the shir in Samach Vav, the Maimarim of the Rashab, only about 5-10 guys were into it, although everyone came, but a lot of people fell asleep, and whatever, and maybe didn't understand. Again, I'm not saying this to make one person better than the other. That's not the point. But the point is that when you want to be makabel, when you want to receive, you need to receive from the right person if that's what you're looking for. So therefore, Rabbi Say, there are serious, real students of Reb Yoel all over the world. This week they had the Fabrengens, and they had videos. Pay attention to those individuals to share what he taught us. And when you'll do that, you'll get a little taste of his teaching and his adracha. And the Rebbe, in the years later, relied on him both in the Sefer Erkim, the Encyclopedia of Chabad, to Rabbi Zevin, Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin, the Goyen, who the author of the main editor of the Encyclopedia Talmudis. He wrote to the Rebbe that it's not coming out quick enough, and also the style he didn't agree with. And the Rebbe said to him, I've given it over to a very, very respectable, knowledgeable person, and how can I pressure him to do his job quicker? I'll be taking away a person's geschmack, a person's pleasure and enjoyment in Chassidus. And I can't do that. The Rebbe writes that to Rabbi Zevin in a letter. It's printed in Igris Kodesh. Look it up. And then later, in the late 1980s, there was an issue with choosing Rabbanim in Crown Heights, and Reb Yoel got involved because he felt it had to do with the Rebbe's honor. And someone wrote to the Rebbe saying it's not his position, not his place. Why is he mixing in? And the Rebbe answered, He has done for me many, many things. I think the Lashon is the assiduous, tens of things, and I've approved them and I've sanctioned them. So don't tell me that he has no place in getting involved in this area. And there's many, many other things. No one's perfect. People make mistakes. Reb Yoel made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But as far as the Rebbe's understanding the Rebbe and the Rebbe's mahalach, the Rebbe's approach, what the Rebbe wanted of Chassidim, what the Rebbe wanted of the Jewish people, what the Rebbe wanted of Shluchim, what the Rebbe wanted of Lubavitch, he was the closest that got it right. Well, the Eibishter helfen that this Shabbos, Vav Elul, is 30 days, the Shloshim from the time when his neshama returned to the Eibishter, that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Almighty, should have mercy on Klal Yisrael, bring Mashiach already, so he, the Rebbe, and all other Yidden will be resurrected with the coming of Mashiach, and will do this with Simcha, because everything needs Simcha. Without joy, without Simcha, it doesn't It doesn't go. It doesn't work. We should do it with simcha and sincerity and humility, and we'll be zeicha to the Gula Shlema because of Mamish, Mashiach now. Aksiva v'achsima teva, shana teva masuka may be written, inscribed in the book of life for a sweet, healthy, happy new year. Amen v'amen.